All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into some serious brain food. We're taking on the complete works of Plato.
Oh, yeah.
And trust me, it's a philosophical feast.
They still fly.
But don't worry, we're going to break down his most important dialogues and give you a real Plato 101 experience.
Yeah, we're going to be like your guides, kind of like.
Yeah, through this incredible philosophical landscape.
Yeah.
So when people think about Plato, a lot of times they think about Socrates. Can you tell us a bit more about how that relationship kind of shaped Plato's writing?
Yeah, so Socrates was more than just Plato's teacher. Like, he was a huge inspiration. And he never actually wrote anything down himself. So
Wow.
everything that we know about him, we get from Plato and a few other contemporaries.
That's wild.
Yeah, yeah. And so what's really cool is that Plato doesn't just present Socrates' ideas straight up. He uses these dialogues, these like vivid conversations where Socrates is kind of challenging other people's assumptions and using that to explore different philosophical questions.
So it's like we're eavesdropping on these ancient debates.
Totally, yeah.
Rather than just getting like a laundry list of points, we actually get to see how he arrived at these ideas.
Totally. And that's what makes it so engaging, right? Like, they're not just these dry lectures. They're full of drama, wit, and like real intellectual sparring.
Right.
So you actually get to see their personalities kind of coming to life.
So where should we even start? Like, where's a good entry point for us to dive into all this Socratic thought?
Let's look at the Euthyphro. It's a great example of how Socrates uses his famous method of questioning to kind of expose these flaws in people's thinking.
Right. And this one's also a bit ironic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because he's on trial for impiety, and he ends up having this conversation with somebody who considers himself like a real expert in that area.
Totally, yeah. So Socrates is actually on trial for impiety, and he ends up having this conversation with Euthyphro, who thinks he's this big expert on piety because he's prosecuting his own father for murder.
Whoa.
Family drama, right?
Intense. So how does that play out? How does that conversation about piety actually go?
So Socrates, being Socrates, starts asking Euthyphro to like define piety.
Right. Seems simple enough.
Right? But Euthyphro like really quickly gets all tangled up in these contradictions as Socrates probes deeper into his understanding of what piety even means.
So it's not even about like finding the right answer. It's really about that process.
Totally.
Of constantly questioning, challenging assumptions.
Yeah.
To get to the heart of like, what do we really even mean when we say these big concepts?
Exactly. And that's a theme that you see throughout all of Plato's works. Like, he wants you to think critically, not just accept things that are given to you.
So the Euthyphro kind of sets the stage for that journey.
Totally.
What other Socratic dialogues should people kind of be familiar with?
The apology is essential. It gives us this like firsthand account of Socrates' trial and how he defended himself against these accusations of corrupting the youth of Athens. And it's in this dialogue that we find that really famous line, the unexamined life is not worth living.
It's such a powerful statement
Yeah.
and still resonates today.
Yeah.
So even when facing these serious charges, he was really standing up for his principles.
Principle.
That idea that questioning and inquiry is good for society.
Totally. He believed that like challenging people to think critically was the best thing for a healthy society. And then there's Crito, which actually takes place when Socrates is in prison, like awaiting execution.
Oh, yeah.
And his friend Crito is trying to convince him to escape.
Okay.
And so this leads to this really, really profound ethical debate about the nature of justice and the rule of law. Like, is it ever okay to break the law, even if you think it's unjust?
That's a question that we still struggle with today.
Yeah.
Like, when is it okay? When is it not? What does that even mean?
Right. And Socrates' answer might surprise you. He argues that even though he believes he's been wrongly convicted, he still has to obey the law because he, as a citizen of Athens, agreed to like abide by the rules.
So it's like he's putting his duty to the state above his own personal freedom.
Totally. Yeah.
Wow. Quite the commitment to principle.
It is. It shows how deeply he believed in social order and the rule of law.
So those early dialogues really pack a punch. Is there anything else we should kind of highlight before we move on from this period?
Yeah, Phaedo. It's really important because it goes into the nature of the soul and what happens after death.
Okay.
And this is where Plato really starts to like develop his own ideas and especially his really famous theory of forms.
Yeah. That could be a tough one.
Yeah, it's a little...
Can you give us like the Spark Notes version of it?
Totally, yeah. So imagine a perfect circle. you can draw a circle on a piece of paper, but it will never be totally perfect, right? It'll always have little imperfections.
Yeah, it's just a representation.
Right, exactly. So Plato's argument is that those perfect concepts, like the perfect circle or like perfect justice, exist in this separate realm, which he calls the realm of forms.
Okay.
And these forms are like eternal and unchanging,
Right.
unlike our world that we experience through our senses, which is always changing and shifting and stuff.
So our world is just like a shadow play of these perfect forms.
That's a great way to put it. And in Phaedo, what Plato argues that the soul, being eternal and unchanging, is more like those forms than it is like the physical world.
So even though our bodies die, our souls, because they're connected to these perfect forms, live on.
Yeah. And Phaedo isn't just about death. It's about this pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah.
And the idea that true understanding comes from thinking about those eternal forms.
Right.
It lays the groundwork for a lot of his later work.
So we have a good foundation now in these early Socratic dialogues.
Yeah.
I know Plato goes on to explore all sorts of other topics in his later works.
Yeah.
Where do we head next in this philosophical journey?
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and look at the Cratyluses. It's all about the nature of language.
Language.
Yeah, and how it's related to reality.
I think about that a lot.
It's actually super relevant today, even.
What kind of questions is he tackling in the Cratylus?
So he's wrestling with this question that we still talk about now, right?
Right.
Like, do words have, like, set meanings?
Right.
Or are they just, like, random labels that we all agree on? So, like, is calling a chair actually capturing, like, its essence?
Right.
Or is it just, like, a sound that we use?
It makes you wonder if the way we even talk about things really shapes how we view the world.
Totally, yeah. And Plato, like, really goes into it and explores different theories.
Oh, cool.
Like the idea that words might actually imitate the things that they're representing.
Wow.
Or that, like, they were given to us by the gods.
It's crazy to think that people were debating this thousands of years ago.
I know.
Does he come to a conclusion?
Like a lot of his dialogues, the Cratylus is more about asking the questions than giving you the answers. But the process of inquiry is what's most important.
Right.
It makes you really think critically about language.
Yeah.
And how it shapes the way we see things.
So it's about the journey, not the destination.
Totally.
I love that. And that journey takes us to another really important dialogue, the Theaetetus.
Yes.
And this one is all about knowledge.
Yeah. So it's all about, like, what is knowledge, really?
Oh, the big question.
The big one, yeah. So is it just perception? Is it just, like, believing something? Or is it believing something and having a reason for believing it?
So many possibilities. Does he land on a single definition?
He goes through all of them,
Okay.
and he uses his classic style of logic and poking holes in all the arguments, kind of highlighting the limits of each of them. And then right when you think he's going to tell you what knowledge is, it just ends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, without a clear resolution.
So, again, it's about the process.
The journey.
Yeah, not the destination.
Exactly. And I think Theaetetus shows us that figuring out what knowledge is way harder than we might think. It makes us really question what we believe and why.
It's a good reminder that knowledge takes careful thought, and we should always be challenging our assumptions.
Exactly. And that's what makes Plato so relevant today. It's not about memorizing a bunch of rules.
Right.
It's about developing those skills to think critically.
Yeah.
And to kind of stay open-minded.
Love it.
So speaking of challenging,
Yeah.
let's move on to another dialogue. The sophist.
Sophist. I feel like I've heard whispers of this one.
Yeah.
But those tricky figures, right? Like those ancient Greek masters of rhetoric and persuasion.
The one, yeah. But it's not just a history lesson. It's actually this really deep look at deception, the power of language, and the difference between real knowledge and just what seems to be true.
So it's like a philosophical detective story.
Exactly, yeah. And Plato uses this method called division, where he carefully breaks down categories.
Oh.
And looks at how they're related.
Okay.
And he uses this to try to figure out, like, what exactly makes a sophist a sophist?
It sounds complicated.
It's definitely complex, but it's amazing to see how Plato's mind works. And along the way, he brings up all these huge questions about, like, being and non-being, the nature of reality, and how images shape the way we see the world.
So it's not just defining this historical figure. It's about these deep philosophical questions that we still grapple with today.
Yeah, for sure. The sophist is a reminder for us to be critical, to question what we see, what we hear,
Right.
and to be careful of people who are more interested in winning arguments than finding the truth.
Such a valuable skill, especially now.
It is, yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
There's so much more to explore in the world of Plato.
There is.
I'm ready for the next challenge. What awaits?
Okay, let's move from the individual to the whole society and talk about the statesman.
Go politics.
Yeah, it's about the ideal ruler and good governance.
I'm excited to hear what he has to say about leadership. Is this going to be his blueprint for the perfect society?
Well, he definitely has some opinions about what makes a good leader. He says the real statesman needs a deep understanding of justice and what's good for everyone, and they use this knowledge to guide their actions.
So it's not just about power or popularity.
No, it's about wisdom and ethics.
Okay.
Yeah, so not just anyone can be a good leader.
Right. It takes a special kind of person with the right kind of knowledge.
Exactly. He even compares it to a shepherd taking care of their flock. He says a good leader should care for the citizens in the same way that a shepherd takes care of their sheep.
It's such a beautiful image.
Yeah.
It's about serving others, not just yourself.
Totally.
Does he talk about different forms of government in this?
He does. He talks about the good and bad of different systems, from democracies to tyrannies. And while he ultimately thinks the best kind of government is ruled by a wise and just person, he also knows that real-world politics are messy. Right.
And finding the perfect system is hard.
So even though he has his ideals, he's still realistic about the challenges of making it work.
Totally. Yeah. The statesman reminds us that good government takes careful thought, ethical leaders, and really understanding human nature.
It makes you think about the kind of leaders we need in the world today.
Yeah.
So these dialogues set the stage for what's probably his most famous work, The Republic.
Actually,
Okay.
The Republic.
I have to admit, that one a little intimidating.
It's a big one. But we'll get there.
My brain needs a break before we take that one on.
Let's take a breather and let everything sink in. There's a lot more to come.
Okay. All right. I think I'm ready to tackle this philosophical titan, The Republic.
It is a big one.
It is.
But it is so worth it.
I'm excited to hear about this perfect society. But I have to say, the idea of a philosopher designing a perfect world kind of freaks me out a little bit. What if it's some dystopian nightmare? Right. I mean, it has sparked a lot of debate over the years.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing to remember is that he's not really giving us a blueprint for an actual government.
Okay.
It's more like a thought experiment, a way to explore those big questions about justice and morality and how we should live.
Okay. That makes me feel a little better. So where do we even begin with something as huge and complicated as the Republic?
Well, one of the most famous parts is the allegory of the cave. It's this really powerful metaphor that helps us understand his ideas about knowledge.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
But I'm a little fuzzy on the details. Can you refresh my memory?
Okay, so picture this. A group of prisoners, they've spent their whole lives chained up in a cave facing a blank wall. All they ever see are shadows projected on the wall from things passing by behind them.
Okay.
And they think those shadows are reality.
It's a little bleak.
Yeah, it is. But then one prisoner escapes the cave and climbs up into the sunlight. At first, he's totally blinded by the light, but slowly he starts to adjust and sees the world for how it really is.
So it's like going from a world of illusion to a world of true understanding.
Exactly. So how does this relate to us, right? Like, we're not literally living in a cave.
Yeah.
But think about how we get information today. We're constantly bombarded with news and opinions and images, right?
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Right. So it's easy to get caught up in all that surface level stuff and miss the deeper truths underneath.
So the cave represents our limited perspective.
Yeah.
And escaping the cave represents that process of, like, seeking knowledge and challenging what we think we know.
Exactly. Plato wants us to be like that escaped prisoner. He wants us to question everything and strive for a deeper understanding of reality.
I like that. But how does this allegory connect to his vision for a perfect society?
So in The Republic, he argues that just like individuals can be enlightened, society can be structured in a way that promotes justice and harmony for everyone. And he proposes a society divided into 3 classes, each with their own role and responsibilities.
Okay, 3 classes. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this structure.
So at the top, you've got the philosopher kings, the wisest and most just people. Kind of like that escaped prisoner, right?
Yeah.
They've seen the truth,
right?
And they're the only ones fit to rule.
So it's not about power or being popular.
No.
It's about wisdom and actually understanding what justice means.
Exactly. Below them, you've got the guardians, the brave and loyal people who protect the city and enforce the laws.
They're like the warriors, right? Defending the society.
Yeah, exactly. And then lastly, you've got the producers, the craftspeople and farmers and merchants, all the folks who provide for the city's material needs.
Okay, so everyone has a role to play,
Yeah,
but not everyone is suited for every role,
right.
like a well-organized team.
Exactly. Plato thought each class should excel in their area, contributing to the overall harmony and stability of the state.
I can see how that works in theory, but is that really a practical model for a real society? I feel like that could create a pretty rigid system.
Right, and that's a debate people have been having for centuries.
Yeah.
Some people say it's way too hierarchical, right?
Yeah.
That it stifles freedom and creativity.
Right.
But others really admire Plato's ambition and his focus on justice and wisdom.
So even if it's not a perfect blueprint,
Yeah.
it still gives us some valuable insight into how to think about justice
Totally.
and the challenges of making a society that works for everyone.
For sure. And that's what makes the Republic so relevant today. It makes us think about how our own societies are structured.
Right.
And how we can make them fairer for everyone.
I'm starting to see why this is considered such a huge work. It's not just about politics.
No.
It's a deep philosophical exploration of how we should live and organize ourselves.
Yeah. And within the Republic, he goes even deeper into this idea of justice.
Okay.
He argues that justice isn't just about following the rules or punishing people who break them. It's about this deeper harmony within each person and within the whole society.
So it's not just external rules, it's about our internal state.
Totally. Plato believes that our souls are divided into three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite.
Okay.
And for each person, justice means each part of the soul is doing its job with reason in control.
So it's like having a balanced personality
Exactly.
where your rational mind is running the show.
Yeah. And for society, it means each class is fulfilling its purpose, working together for the good of the whole state.
It's so interesting how he connects individual justice to justice on a societal level.
Total.
It's like zooming in and zooming out.
It is, yeah. For Plato, it's all about achieving this state of harmony, both within ourselves and in our relationships with each other.
It makes you think about how we define justice in our own world, right?
Totally.
It's not just about laws and punishments. It's about making sure everyone has the chance to thrive.
That's one of the big takeaways from the Republic, for sure. It challenges us to really think about how our societies work and how we can create fairness for everyone.
Okay, we did it. We tackled the Republic.
We did.
My brain is officially fried.
I know, right?
Where do we even go from here?
Well, we've explored some of his most important works, but there's still so much more in his dialogues. Let's switch gears again, go to something a little lighter, but still full of philosophical insight. The Symposium.
Symposium, I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
That one's about love, right?
It is.
It's a nice change of pace after all this talk about justice and perfect societies.
It is, yeah. The Symposium is structured like a dinner party where a bunch of friends, including Socrates, get together to talk about love.
A philosophical dinner party.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Right. So we've got wine, conversation, ancient Greeks talking about love.
I'm in. Let's hear it. All right, let's dig into this philosophical feast. The Symposium. A dinner party, there's wine, conversation.
Yeah.
And it's all about love. Sign me up.
You and me both. But this isn't just some casual romantic dinner, you know. It's a gathering of some of the best minds in ancient Athens. And they're not just like gossiping about their crushes. They're really exploring the nature of love, its different forms, and like how it shapes us.
Okay, paint the picture for us. What's the vibe at this philosophical party?
So the dialogue is this series of speeches, and each guest takes a turn praising Eros, the Greek god of love.
Oh, interesting.
And these speeches are all over the place. Like, some are playful and funny.
Okay.
Some are super philosophical, even mythical.
So not just some boring academic discussion. There's humor, passion, maybe even a little drama.
Totally. And what's so cool is how each speaker shows their own view on love
Right.
based on their personality and their philosophy. Some are all about the physical side, the pleasure and desire, while others go deep into the spiritual and intellectual aspects.
That's like a kaleidoscope of perspectives on this thing we all experience.
Right.
Where does Socrates fit into all of this? I'm guessing he doesn't just give a typical gushy love speech.
You know Socrates. He always has to take things deeper. So instead of praising Eros himself, he tells the story about a conversation he had with a wise woman named Diotima.
Oh, so he's bringing in a woman's perspective. I like it. What does Diotima have to say about love?
Well, she kind of flips the whole idea of love upside down. She tells Socrates that real love isn't just about finding someone attractive or feeling good. It's about this much deeper longing, a desire for something that goes beyond the physical world.
So it's not just about romance or attraction. There's something bigger at play here.
Exactly. Diotima explains that love is like a ladder, a journey upwards. It starts with appreciating physical beauty, but it slowly takes us to the love of knowledge, of virtue, and finally, to contemplating the form of beauty itself.
Wait, the form of beauty. We talked about this, right? This is where Plato's theory of forms comes back.
You got it. Remember those perfect, eternal concepts that exist beyond our senses. The form of beauty is like the source of all beauty in the world. Everything we find beautiful here is just a reflection of this perfect form.
Okay, I see how it all ties together. Love, for Diotima, is what makes us want beauty. But real love takes us past the surface and leads us to this higher level of understanding.
That's it. Love isn't just about fleeting feelings or physical stuff. It's this powerful force that can help us grow intellectually and spiritually. It's what drives us to learn, to be good, and to think about the deepest truths of existence.
That's a pretty inspiring way to think about love. It's not just about finding someone, it's about this lifelong search for wisdom and beauty in all its forms.
Yeah, exactly. And the Symposium makes us look at love in a totally new way, to see how it can change our lives.
This journey through Plato's work has been amazing. We've wrestled with tough ethical questions, explored the nature of reality, imagined perfect societies, and thought about the power of love. It's been a real philosophical marathon.
It has. And it's incredible that even though these dialogues are ancient, they still speak to us today. They deal with these fundamental questions about being human, questions that are just as relevant now as they were back then.
Absolutely. Plato pushes us to think critically, question what we believe, and try to understand ourselves and the world better.
And that's a challenge worth taking on, even if it means getting a little uncomfortable and wrestling with some tough ideas.
I couldn't agree more. So, to everyone out there who loves to learn, I encourage you to explore Plato's work. You might be surprised by what you find.
And who knows, you might even fall in love with philosophy in the process.
That's a great thought. Until next time, keep those minds working.